You found us! Today's case is about Tracy Thompson, a victim of brutal crime, who then told us who her killer was, but her case is still unsolved. So before we always get into this sort of thing, I need to cover my disclaimers really fast. Please be sensitive in the comments. These cases feature real people with family that do care about them. Do not send hate to anyone. My coverage is for education and it's based on publicly available info. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. Content warnings. You guys have told me a lot that this is important to you, so if you do research this case, most of you want to know, are there graphic images and things like that? No, this particular case, you're going to be alright. If you search it, you'll see a photo of Tracy Thompson, but it's not related to her murder. So, however, there is graphically written content describing the scene available, and there are some hate speeches if you get into like comments and things like that. So that's just a heads up for you guys. That is not here. I mean, we'll cover the case, but we're not going to sensationalize. If it's something important to the case, we're going to cover it. Today's themes for the episode, so you know if you want to go ahead and skip out or not, are transgender, violent murder, unsolved, and then of course there might be some talk of the hate speech that I have encountered here and there. Make sure that you put your mental health first, so if this sounds like something that you cannot handle, click off and I'll just see you on a different case, okay? So let's go ahead and dig into the case. You guys are going to have to forgive me just a little bit because this is a case that I researched a while ago before I had COVID, so I'm a little bit out of the loop. I'll just be reading from my own notes, but you know how that goes. So we'll start with a timeline of events. That's where I love to start. It kind of helps put things into place so we know what's going on. And then we'll talk a little bit further about the people involved and any other extenuating circumstances that you might need to know. So the timeline of events, everything starts around March in 1999. So March 19th, this is an estimated date, Tracy Thompson was in the Dalton, Georgia area. On March 30th, this would be a Tuesday, sometime before dawn. We're going to talk about the weather too. The high was 69, the low was 40, the weather was fair. The sun rises at 6:31 a.m. and sets at 7 p.m. Tracy Thompson is attacked. We know that she was attacked with a baseball bat on a wooded road at a crossroads, and that it was in a rural area of Wilcox County, Georgia. This area is north of Seville, 10 miles east of Cordell. So if that helps anybody from that area listening, I hope it does. It was also about 10 miles from the interstate. See, I'm wondering if that helps anybody, because they might know, like, maybe some history. I know, in my area, in the rural area, there's just some places that everybody knows what they're used for, but at the same time, that's not like a public thing. Like an outsider wouldn't know that. So that's why I'm putting in the details about this location. Maybe there's somebody there that can be like, that particular location is where, whatever. So here we're going to get into the graphic details of her death. If you need to skip ahead a few minutes, that's fine. Thompson suffered at minimum 7 blows to the head. And according to the GBI agent Lee Weathersby, a broken baseball bat was at the scene. However, later you find out it's actually just like a sliver of a piece of one. And then there's other clues there like a tire track and some blood. So Thompson was wearing jeans and a pink flowered shirt. About 4:30 a.m. after this event occurred, Thompson is still alive, and she walks to the farmhouse of I don't know if I want to say their name. I'll put it in my report. I won't put it here, but Mr. and Mrs. B, we'll just call them B, a quarter of a mile from the crime scene. Thompson had followed the dirt road. There, she knocks on the door. She's asking for help. Obviously, she's injured, and they recognize that. They say she's bleeding from the head. Thompson asks for water and a blanket and to rest. She tells them she had been beaten with a baseball bat. They call for help. Thompson's then transported to the Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital in Albany. There, she's still alive and she speaks to the nurses and the GBI. The investigators before her brain swelling began. Then she claims that the person who killed her was an ex-boyfriend. Quote, Thompson said before she died that her boyfriend beat her up. What we're trying to do is determine what she means by boyfriend and who that boyfriend is. Unquote. That was from one of the investigators. And then Thompson succumbed to her wounds only 10 hours after arriving at the hospital. She passes sometime in the afternoon. So we are going to April 1st now. That would be a Thursday. An off-duty state patrol finds the baseball bat handle, and it was in a ditch about a mile away from the crime scene. I don't know why he was out there. But I guess this was a big deal, so maybe everybody wanted to help. And then on the 2nd, that's a Friday now, they attempt to find Thompson's boyfriend. They find 3 matching names to what she had told them. And they're all from Georgia. All of them are truck drivers, and all of them apparently have alibis. One of them was out of town at the time and was completely ruled out. Here's another quote from the investigators. Quote, I would look at who she traveled with from someone from the North Georgia to here. Who was that person? And we've not discovered who that is yet. Again, that's Weatherby talking, unquote. And I'm actually going to fix one of my notes here because they put the wrong pronoun. So when I'm writing on cases like this, I try very hard to, I put these in brackets so that you can see that I corrected it. I try really hard to make sure that the pronouns are correct because we have enough of that crap. Anyways, investigators, they look into a lead about somebody who was making threats in the area. This person had a history of hate specifically against the LGBTQ plus community, but no links were determined. Also, early into the investigation, and we see this a lot. We see this a lot with trans cases, and I understand why they would think it, but I also think that it can slow down the investigation if they focus on it too much. So early in the investigation, they immediately theorized that the murder was a hate crime. Someone picked up Thompson and then killed her when they realized that she was transgender. See, the reason why, it's not that I'm upset with the hate crime part, it's the fact that they automatically assume that the transgender person is a sex worker. And I don't like that because it can put bad connotations about morality in people's minds and opinions, and then the cases get slowed down. So, not that, I think sex work is a bad thing. I'm just saying that a lot of people do, and then these cases don't get the help they need. Anyways, I'm going to stop ranting, but yeah, I always get a little irritated. Not that I think that you shouldn't investigate all revenues, and if it is what it is, then it is, but you should just be kind of careful about throwing those ideas out into the public at first, you know? Anyway, it's kind of a gray zone. I'll just move on. So that was discussed, but this idea got lost traction over time. And now they don't know if her death had anything to do with her being transgender. Lastly, they investigated Thompson's prison cellmate. This person denied even knowing Thompson, but then this person was ruled out. So, April 4th in 1999, investigators then go to the public and they ask for help in solving the case. It's kind of an uphill battle from what I can tell here. The public wasn't very interested in helping, from what I understand. I could be wrong. 2009, all physical evidence was reevaluated with new DNA technology, and witnesses were re-interviewed. And then fast forward all the way again to 2015, it's August 12th. They publicly say the investigation has not stopped, and it's being reviewed quarterly. So I'm going to give you a quote. Quote, "Even to this day, when we go back and look at this case, we go back and look at it from the beginning. What was done then, what needs to be done now. We still have a couple of leads we're following up, but in any unsolved case, the longer they go unsolved, the harder it gets." Unquote. And I agree with that. Fast forwarding, November 7th, 2017. Weatherby again, he's talking and he says, "The evidence has been tested multiple times. It's been tested with new technology. There's still no suspect." So, and that's the whole case. Unfortunately, there's not much else to talk about except for the people. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's talk about Tracy Thompson first. Miss Thompson was born February 7th, 1966, and then she was murdered brutally March 30th, 1999, at only 33 years old. She was then interned at West Hill Cemetery in Dalton, Whitfield County, Georgia, USA, where Thompson was a local. Thompson enjoyed traveling, and she did not stay in one place for long. Thompson may have had an aunt and uncle in Florida. Thompson would stay in Florida about 6 months to a year before hitchhiking back to Georgia. Thompson did frequently hitchhike from crisp Wilcox counties to the Floridas. Thompson was known to hitchhike on the interstate, mainly I-75, and stay at truck stops. Thompson lived in Miami, Fort Myers, and Florida. So if you're from those areas or anything sounds like you might know, just think about that and see if you have any info. They have not been able to locate anyone traveling with her at this time, and she was not in contact with family or friends at the time of her murder. Thompson was unemployed at the time of her murder, and Thompson is categorized as a high-risk victim because of her transient lifestyle. So this is where we're going to get into the content where it's kind of mild hate. This one is it's dead naming. So if you don't know what dead naming is, it's a slang term used by transgender and the LGBTQ plus communities. Dead naming is when a name is not being used by the person, is published or released publicly. It is considered very disrespectful in this community, and it can slow down an investigation. People might know the victim only as the pronoun or name that they use in their daily life. So if you try to throw out a different one that they never used, people are going to be confused, and it'll slow the whole situation down. But this is exactly, almost every case, this is exactly what they do to them. There is a very good article available by ProPublica, and that will be in my blog. So if you want the link to that and you want to read more about dead naming and why that's a problem, check out that article. Anyways, Thompson was dead named, she was misgendered, and her personal criminal history was released to the public. Again, very problematic. It's not helpful. They also described her with antiqued words, transvestite. That really just sows hate in people. An example would be the local newspaper reporting, I remember this quote now. Oh my gosh. Okay, guys, if you can't handle this sort of stuff, definitely click off now. The local news reporting about Thompson. There's this quote. He said, "They say he was wearing a dress." Retiree Fred King told the Associated Press. "Most people in this area would say, hell, he needed killing." Unquote. So, this is why I cover cases like this. I'm sorry, but Miss Thompson deserves justice. She didn't deserve to be killed in the first place, and she most certainly didn't deserve this disrespect after death. Did you know in 2020, I think it's 52% of transgender children thought about committing suicide? 52% of American children that are transgender thought about committing suicide because of the adult bullying that was happening against them and because of their lack of support. I cannot understand how people cannot hold the sanctity of life. I just don't get it. Over a gender. That just does not make sense to me. Anyways, I'm sharing this information about Tracy Thompson, and the reason I'm going to be sharing her dead name is because the case is so very cold, and I'm doing it with the intent that it might solve Thompson's murder. And because she doesn't have family and friends that I can talk to about this, I'm going to go ahead and make a choice. They're calling me again. And since this information is already out there, so this case has very few leads, very few tips, so I thought maybe if we release the name, maybe somebody would know her by that name, because I don't know if maybe she switched back and forth or what. But yeah. So Thompson's dead name was Billie Joe Turner. And when Thompson was in Dalton, Georgia, she would sometimes, I did put this note in here. Okay, she would sometimes use Tracy Turner. So between Georgia and Florida, Thompson had about 50 arrests. I'd like to note, though, that they're all non-violent, very petty crimes. And she did serve time in prison for theft. So, again, not something we need to condemn somebody over, for goodness sakes. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. Anyway, so I hope that information helps solve the case. I hope, that helps. And I'd like to ask you to do the same. Like, if you have to talk about this case and you're going to release her dead name, consider why and how you're doing it, and maybe explain that to people so they don't use that as an excuse to do that to other people in the future where it's not necessary. Okay. So transgender activists in California actually declared a state of emergency after Thompson's death because Thompson was the 5th publicly reported murder. They tried to raise the alarm for this growing epidemic. This is an epidemic, by the way. From that time to now, it's gotten worse. Murders in the area were already rare, but unsolved murders even rarer, according to Mike Martin, who was the Wilcox County Sheriff at the time, and he was deputy at Thompson's murder. So, just think about the rarity of this case and why it's not solved. It's silly. So, Thompson did kick off a good movement of her people trying to protect their own, but at the same time, this case shouldn't have gone this long without it being unsolved. I think it's solvable. So, I don't know why it's just sitting there. Anyways, if you happen to know anything about Tracy Thompson, call the Wilcox County Sheriff's Office or the GBI Perry officer, and those numbers are in my blog, as well as if you don't trust them, because I understand if you don't, go to Crime Stoppers and then submit your tip through them. So you could do that as well. Anyways, you can remain anonymous on Crime Stoppers. So I did put together like a case speculation connection, like a few areas that I thought maybe kind of sounded really similar. I'll put that in my blog and see what you guys think. Maybe you can add to it. And that is going to conclude her case. So I always try to conclude with what can we do? And I think sharing her story is what we can do. So share it, make your own content about her, share that, talk about it, maybe tweet the police in that area and be like, hey, you guys still working on this, right? You can get transgender activists involved, because if they know about the case, they will pick it up and they will work with law enforcement to try to get things rolling. So there's lots of stuff you can do to help Tracy Thompson, and I really think you should. Also, if any of the info that I said triggers any memories for you, please turn in the tips. Anything to help her out, right? Okay. So that's it. I thank you guys for listening. I hope that you come back again. I try to do at least one case a month because it takes me a lot of time to research these things. So if you're interested, come back. I cover a lot of transgender murders, children, and women, because they're most marginalized. I love you guys. I know this is hard topics to talk about, but it needs to be done. If it was you, if it was me, I want it to be done. Okay. Bye. Love you. Mwah, mwah, mwah.